And the fact is, the vast majority of gun owners in America are responsible. They buy their guns legally, and they use them safely, whether for hunting or sport shooting, collection, or protection. But you know what? I am also betting that the majority, the vast majority of responsible, law-abiding gun owners would be some of the first to say that we should be able to keep an irresponsible, law-breaking few from buying a weapon of war.
This year on June 12th, the nation went through the deadliest mass shooting it has ever faced. Carrying an assault rifle and a pistol that he legally purchased, a 29-year-old man named Omar Mateen walked into Pulse nightclub. Over the course of 3 hours, the man shot and killed 49 people and injured at least 53 more. Mateen, according to his wife, was undiagnosed with bipolar disorder and had previous issues with steroids and domestic abuse. Mateen was interviewed by the FBI agent Ronald Hopper in 2013 and 2014 after co-workers at the Florida courthouse where he was a security guard told authorities he boasted of connections to Al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations, and subsequently was placed on the terrorist watch list for 10 months. Because he had previously obtained a permit to work as an armed security guard, he was able to buy his weapons in under an hour from a licensed dealer who didn't have to look into his background. Although he did pledge allegiance to ISIS in the act, there was an underlying problem here. If he had been diagnosed with his condition and checked properly, the shooting may have never occurred.
There most certainly are flaws in the national system that must be addressed. First of all, the largest issue with the federal gun legislation is that private, unlicensed dealers are not required to conduct background checks at all. This is no small number of sales, accounting for about 40% of all firearms transfers. This now includes online purchases due to the new digital world. This private access to guns is often called the gun show loophole, but actually applies to all private dealers. Even through public dealers, purchasers can avoid the check system through use of a permit. This loophole, known as the Brady exemption, could allow a person who falls into the prohibited requirements within the 5 years after the license is issued for the firearm. In scenarios where checks are conducted, there are still problems in national policy. Though 90% of all cases are rather quick, 9% of checks require further investigation through the FBI, who have a 3-day period to respond with a decision. However, these transactions rarely fit into this time frame. Over 2,500 individuals who would have been denied were allowed to walk away with a firearm in 2014, and their cases took an average of 25 days for assessment, according to FBI data. These cases, known as default proceeds, are 8 times more likely than other background checks to involve a prohibited purchaser. Then, within the background check system, there are flaws. The most glaring of these issues surrounds the issues of reporting records. States are not allowed to give identifying information to federal databases and are often negligent in other areas. A survey of the states conducted in December 2010 found that only 12 states reported that 80% or more of their felony charges had a final disposition recorded in their criminal history databases. This problem extends into mental health records, a central issue in the gun control debate. Beginning with legislation in 1968, the government made it illegal to sell firearms to buyers with mental illness or qualifies as mentally defective. States don't look into or report information on prior mental health diagnoses or treatments because sending them would be a violation of individual privacy rights. On top of this, many mental health issues don't receive the proper care and recognition in the first place. Without this information, the FBI's and CIS cannot make an accurate determination on the ability of a citizen to buy a gun.
But change is possible and has been proven effective in other countries. The best example of this is Australia. The country had 13 mass shootings from 1979 to 1996. This hit a breaking point when a man named Martin Bryant became the worst killer in Australia's history. After walking into a cafe in Port Arthur, Tasmania, he killed 35 people and wounded 23 others with a semi-automatic rifle and another semi-automatic handgun. It took Prime Minister John Howard a short period of 6 weeks to enact a strict gun control policy. Aside from banning certain semi-automatic and self-loading rifles and shotguns, the legislation required all firearm license applicants to show genuine reason for owning a gun, which couldn't include self-defense. Additionally, the government purchased back nearly 700,000 guns. Percentage-wise, that's the equivalent of 40 million in the U.S. As a result, in the decade after this policy was introduced, the firearm homicide rate fell by 59%, and the firearm suicide rate fell by 65%, without increases in other types of deaths. Now, our group has a policy that could improve the chances that an individual who shouldn't obtain a weapon will not be able to, while at the same time preserving the rights of all mentally healthy, law-abiding gun enthusiasts. Essentially, we would like to combine the policies of Minnesota and Washington on a national level. This would mean that we would have firearm vendors only be able to conduct business with a federal license and cut out the Brady permit exemption from the background check system. Then, with the Minnesota and Washington policies, the government would be allowed 5 days to complete a background check on prospective firearm purchasers. However, if records indicate that a prospective purchaser might have an arrest for a potentially disqualifying offense, a hold may be placed on the transaction for up to 30 days. Additionally, a signed mandatory application to purchase a firearm would constitute a waiver of confidentiality and a written request that the Department of Social and Health Services, mental health institutions, and other healthcare facilities release to an inquiring court or law enforcement agency information relevant to the applicant's eligibility to purchase a weapon. This authorization also applies to certain alcohol and drug abuse records, as well as domestic violence protective orders and outstanding warrants. This system would require contact of a viable gun purchaser with mental health facilities and close many loopholes. It may be a bit of an inconvenience for eligible customers, but the policy would not actually change any of the standards for purchasing a weapon. However, it would prevent more individuals who shouldn't have weapons from acquiring them in the first place. Thank you.
It's time for Congress to do something to stop this mass slaughter that's being carried out in our communities. Going forward, Democrats are going to continue to support and continue to push these solutions to our nation's gun violence epidemic. And we're going to, as soon as we can, force a vote on this terror loophole. We're going to do this as soon as possible. There is no excuse for allowing suspected terrorists to buy guns.